All right, man.
All right. Here with my boy Dave DeCamp. We haven't talked in a while. How have you been, Dave?
I'm good, Tommy. Yeah, I was gonna say it's been a little while
Yeah.
since we spoke, so it's good to see you.
Yeah. I've been, man, you've been rocking and rolling. When I see people like you that are so busy, like you and Scott and Kyle, y'all are so busy and y'all are doing so much in your field. I'm like, I try to avoid like contacting you unless I got like something really on my mind that I want to talk to you about. So I just kind of like let y'all be.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to talk to you. I mean, I do get, requests all the time, but you're one of the people I definitely enjoy talking to.
Well, I appreciate
Um,
that, man.
you know.
So the last time we spoke, you had actually asked me afterwards about orthodoxy. We talked a little bit about like finding faith and stuff like that. So I just kind of wanted to start there because you ended up becoming Catholic. And what was it
Mhm.
what was the nail in the coffin? What pushed you in the direction of like, oh, there's something more to this world than the materialist side of things that I see every day.
Well, so, it's interesting you bring that up because before this, I was remembering that you actually kind of played a big role in that. Just some of the few things you told me, some of the podcasts and books to check out. And even just praying the Jesus prayer, like you mentioned that to me, and I think it was because of you that I actually started that,
Oh,
which is pretty cool. And but so I'm a cradle Catholic. I was raised Catholic, and
oh,
when I was a kid, like a young kid, I was like a pretty faithful Catholic. Like I really believed. I prayed a lot. I prayed the rosary with my mom, like in bed. And I mean, this is like when I was like 10, 11, 12 years old.
mhm.
And then, when I was in high school, I just completely went away from the faith and kind of lived that way for a while, basically throughout my entire 20s. But I still always believed, it was always in the back of my mind. Like whenever anybody asked me, if I believed in God, the answer was yes. And do I believe
Mhm.
that God became man and was crucified and died and resurrected? And the answer is always yeah. And I remember feeling like not really wanting to think about that when I was living kind of a life of debauchery.
Mhm.
Because if that's true, well, I'm not living my life, like it is, and that's not good. So I was never really like an atheist. I think maybe at one point when I was in high school, I considered myself one, but I don't think I was ever really like a true atheist or anything like that. And I had a phase in my 20s where I was exploring like kind of Eastern, not Eastern Christianity, like Buddhism and things like that. And I never,
Mhm.
you know, going that way, it seems like you basically just kind of pick and choose what you want to get out of like different religions. Like you see a lot of people kind of do that, at least, my age, millennials. And, but yeah, it always went back to Christianity. And I tried to even, because I was more like liberal when I was younger. And, again, like I lived a pretty degenerate lifestyle for a while. And I would occasionally try to go back to church and I'd find like a progressive church or something like, there's nothing there. There's nothing to bring, even if you're living like that, like there's just nothing appealing there because they don't take it seriously at all. I remember I was at like I don't even know what the denomination was, progressive church, talking about the Nicene Creed. And the preacher was like, "Oh, a lot of people say that they don't believe everything." And it's like, who does believe the whole Nicene Creed? And I was like, "What? Like, this isn't Christianity then? Like, what are you talking
Yeah.
about?" So,
Right.
you know, and a lot of so there's always times I tried to like get back into it, but I think just the way I was living, like I just didn't do it seriously enough. And then I got married and had kids, and that was when it was like, okay, I got to take this seriously. And then for like a couple years, I was kind of trying to figure it out. And Orthodoxy always appealed to me. And a lot of stuff you recommended, like the Lord of Spirits and those guys. Father, what are their names? I've read both
Father
of their
Andrew
like all
Stephen
their
Damick
books.
and Father Stephen DeYoung.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I get them mixed up because there's an Andrew in both of them. But
No, there's a Stephen in
yeah,
both
I
of them.
read a Stephen in both of them. That's right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um,
Father Andrew even says sometimes people call him Father Stephen. So,
Yeah. Even right now, I can't think of who's who. So who wrote the book about St. Paul? I forget what it was called.
St. Paul the Pharisee was
It was
written
like,
by Father Stephen DeYoung.
yeah.
Yeah, and he
Okay,
he
yeah. So
he
Stephen
did
DeYoung.
he did a more introspective kind of translation of all the books, all the epistles of Paul in the back of it. Really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I listened to that on audiobook and I really liked it. Um, and I listened to his Bible study
the whole counsel
podcast
of
a
God.
lot.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and then the other one, Father, oh man,
Father
I'm blanking
Andrew.
on his name now.
Father Andrew.
Father
He
Andrew,
wrote
yeah.
Arise, O God, and then he did the Heterodox and Orthodox book, which is
Hmm.
which is a tome. If you can actually find that one for free on I think it's I think it's just on like Apple Podcasts or whatever. You can find it free as a podcast. It's like 33
Oh wow.
like lectures, yeah, of
Yeah,
heterodox and orthodoxy.
so yeah, they have so much content, so I've consumed a lot of it. And his book, I think it's just called Orthodoxy. It's short. I read it very quickly.
Oh, okay.
But it was interesting because that was the book that made me decide because there's a lot of people who are Christians and just stay at home and read their Bible, and
Mm,
figure it out themselves. And then I kind of got into like sedevacantism, like online YouTube,
hmm.
who are Catholics who believe that like there's an anti-pope and everything, and essentially they just like pray the rosary on Sundays, and that like appealed to me just because I think of my like libertarian like questioning authority background and just like not having to go to a church. But that book convinced me that like no, church is very important, community is
Right.
very important,
Yeah.
and that's when I really started going around to the different churches in my area. Where I live in Virginia, there's not many Catholics. There's only a few Catholic churches
Mm.
within like a 20 to 30 minute drive. And I ended up finding a really good one that's nearby. And it's like I'm one of those people. I remember when I was younger, I like wanted that moment where like that you hear about like when I was reading the Bible and like the words jump out at me and I have this like really spiritual moment, but that just never happened for me. And like I've had significant spiritual breakthroughs, but it's like it's all work. Like it's uh and I think that's because I have the faith. Like I already believe, like
Right.
so for me it's like it just takes the work. It takes reading and scripture. I read a lot of that's pretty much all I do, like read or listen to, I should say. I mean, I mostly listen to audiobooks these days
Right.
besides
Right.
actually reading the Bible. Um, but there's just so much, especially being Catholic, like there's just so much out there to consume. And when it comes to figuring out like which is the correct church, there's so much to that. And like probably could not do well in like a debate with an Orthodox Christian who knows this stuff better
I
about the
can't either.
papacy and things. Yeah. I mean, the thing is like this stuff takes time to like
We
really
I'm not
understand it.
I'm not like super interested in theology and the kind of apologetic side of things. Actually, like the vast majority of what I read is about the saints, the lives of the saints.
Mhm.
So I can because it gives you the perspective of how to take the faith and put it into action. So like right now I'm reading Saint Silouan. And so I'm reading on Saint Silouan the Athonite. This is the second time I've been through this book, and it's like it's this monk, and he's just telling you, he's like, this is what the faith is, and this is how you put it into action in your daily life. And that's what I really need. I don't need to get online and argue with people. I'll just get irritated. That's not good for me.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's the same for me. I was kind of going that route. Not that I like really engage in this online with other people, but for a while, like that was my focus, like the apologetic stuff. But yeah, I moved away from that, and it's similar. I mean, right now I'm reading The Imitation of Christ,
Mm,
and that's basically the same thing. Like, and it's very, it's one of those books. It's like the Gospels. It's like the Beatitudes. You read them, and you're like, oh man, I really gotta, do better in my life.
right.
Um, and but yeah, and yeah, so when it comes to, and I also just feel like I'm in the right place in my church. I really like being a Roman Catholic, like a Western
Yeah.
Catholic.
Yeah.
The so I
There's something
you
culturally
know,
appropriate about that, you know? And
yeah.
I remember hearing it was Father Andrew actually. It was a couple of episodes ago on Lord of Spirits. He had made a comment about how he's seen people that go and read the exact same literature, the exact same church fathers, and come to two different conclusions. Like the Spirit of God speaks to each of us in different ways, and I'm not the type of person to sit there and like you're doing it wrong because I'm just a scumbag truck driver
Yeah.
that's lived like a very, very debauched life. I don't have any right pointing my finger at anybody.
Dude, it's the same with me. And like I do think like I really like Eastern Orthodoxy. And I have a lot of respect for it. Like it's apostolic Christianity. They have the sacraments, the Eucharist, which I think is like everything. I think that
Hmm.
is kind of the most important thing when it comes to
Right.
our faith. And I'll get in my mind about Protestants and stuff. And I have a neighbor who's a Baptist, super faithful person who just knows like so much more than me. And
Hmm.
whenever I talk to him, their family, like they're such faithful people who love God, who they live very good lives. So it's like, who am I to
Right.
go lecture them about like you know their faith?
Right.
So yeah, it's I think this stuff is important. These conversations, especially different between Protestantism and Orthodox Christianity. But at the same time, it's like, as you said, who am I? Like I'm such like a novice at all of this that
Yeah.
it's just not my place to tell anybody what to do. But I would encourage people to go in our direction, but who are entering the faith and everything.
Yeah, I mean, if you notice, like a lot of the stuff I'm putting out right now, especially on like my Substack and my YouTube, I'm just reading. I'm not even like telling people what I think about what I'm reading. I'm just reading. I'm reading Lives of the Saints. I'm reading, teachings of the 12 apostles, and that I'm just reading because I don't feel like I'm qualified to give you a breakdown of it. It's like, here's the literature, here's the prologue of Orid. We have a daily devotional, the prologue of Orid, every day, and it gives you like two, three, four lives of saints and a contemplation um, and a homily every day. And it's like, okay, here it is. That's how I start my day. There it is. Here it is. And I'm not going to sit there and like give you some sort of wild breakdown on what I think about what is being said. I'm not the one to distinguish this. This was written by a saint. Like, who am I? And so yeah, I don't like to get into that. Like my sons, two of my boys go to our Catholic church. They go to are Catholic. They go to Catholic churches. I don't argue with them. I've brought them to church with me before, but I don't argue with them. They can do what they want to do. I mean, each person has to kind of develop this relationship with Christ and let him lead them to where they belong. And prior to
Hmm.
finding orthodoxy, I didn't belong anywhere. That's why I'm Orthodox, because that's where I found Christ, you know.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I felt about, the Catholic Church, like kind of returning to the Catholic Church. It's like, so many saints and Catholic writers have said similar things. Like it was, it's like returning to something that feels new but is ancient. Like,
Right.
you feel like you discovered this new thing, but it's like it's just been there all along.
Right.
And yeah, that stuff you mentioned, like reading about the lives of saints and things is I think that is really big for me because they give you this kind of human example that is a little less intimidating than Christ.
Yeah.
And like it's good to strive for.
Especially the more
And
contemporary saints. Like we have like Saint Paisios, who was, I think he passed away in the 20s, 1920s. Father Seraphim Rose was just ordained a saint, or canonized a saint here recently.
oh, that happened already. I heard that
Yeah,
was going to
yeah,
happen. Yeah.
yeah. So all these, like Saint Sophrony, Saint Silouan, these are saints of the 20th century that you can read about and you can learn about and learn from. And they're speaking a more contemporary language. Whereas sometimes where if you go back in the back and you're reading like St. Gregory of Palamas, it's a little highbrow. It's a little more the translation into English, because it's translated from Greek into English and it's a little bit more difficult to understand how to read that. Whereas if you get into, reading Saint Sophrony, or you get into reading Saint Paisios or Saint Seraphim Rose, then you have the ability to. It's more like talking to your local priest because they're speaking your language.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny, like there's all this, if you see my social media activity, like I am, openly Catholic now, but I don't like weigh in on this stuff. Like the Pope this week just released this 40,000 word encyclical on AI. And it's just amazing to me how many people, Catholics and non-Catholics, just like immediately have an opinion about it, like whether positive, or, very negative or whatever. And it's like this stuff he's talking about, like whatever you think of Pope Leo, he's an Augustinian. He's, the equivalent to like a PhD. And, he's writing at a very high level here. And like the
Mhm.
fact that people like literally that morning, there's like articles, just like critiquing it and talking about how bad it is. And I've gotten fed up with kind of the traditional Catholic like online world because of their kind of reflexive instinct to just always do that. Even
Mhm.
though I kind of like I when it comes to the liturgy and stuff, I certainly lean more traditional, but it's just like I'm just trying to really shut out a lot of the noise from kind of the and I'm sure there's similar things with online Orthodox and
Yeah.
stuff like you just got to like shut some of this stuff out, like some of the arguments and things, and it's like you got to figure it out for yourself. And it's good to have a priest, a spiritual father, to talk to,
Yeah.
um, and kind of like submit to, in a way. It's a very like freeing thing to do,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I think a lot of people could use that. And I'm not saying it's not also good to, figure out things on your own and read things on your own, but having like a church with a history, with a hierarchy, I think is very good when we're talking about like salvation and these things.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with you. I mean, like reading the traditions, like today I just recorded reading the Didache, which is the teaching of the 12 apostles, from the first century. So, I recorded that because like these are, yeah, they're extra biblical texts, but these are texts that have been considered important in the traditions that have been handed down to us. And there's nothing in there that's not biblical. It just condenses it down to like these short 16 chapters. Like these are some bullet points that you need to like kind of keep in mind whenever you're worshiping, when you're dealing with people outside the faith, and et cetera, and conducting your own life. And we all need that. And I was thinking when we were leading up to this podcast, I was thinking about you and what you do, and constantly, I mean, all you do is look at war and death and destruction. That's your whole life. Like there's nothing beautiful there. Like so I could very well see how it's so freeing and almost like soothing to have that daily devotion every day with God in your life.
Hmm. Oh yeah, yeah, and I mean, it's interesting. Like you see the different things that Western Catholics and Eastern Orthodox, like kind of the things that we emphasize differ a little bit. And
Mm.
obviously, going to a Catholic church, there's always a crucifix. The cross is always front and center. The
Right.
suffering of Christ, and like this world, like this stuff that I follow, it doesn't really make sense without that, without the cross.
Right.
So yeah, it's really helped me a lot. I mean, and like I have a devotion. I meditate on the Passion every day. That's something I always make sure I do. I mean, I have a great life. Like it's a weird disconnect because of what I do. I live out in the country with my wife and three little kids, and like we just have a beautiful little life here. And I mean,
Mm.
that's one reason why I'm anti-war, like in the political sense, is that we don't need to be involved in these foreign conflicts, and there's a chance that these things could really come home, especially as technology develops,
Right.
and bring war here, where I have this beautiful, peaceful life. But yeah, it's like, I mean, dealing with this stuff, the Gaza stuff, like seeing the kids like ripped apart by bombs every day. It's like, how do you reconcile that if you don't have faith? Like you just
Mhm.
become a nihilist. And that's something I see in our content in the comments, like
Yeah.
people that do feel that way. Like, so I try not to become, you don't want to become a nihilist. Like,
Yeah.
but it's easy to. And a lot of people get burnt out, like, cause I do a daily show, like where I go over the news that I cover every day and it can be pretty rough. And I
Yeah.
know I hear from a lot of people that like, yeah, I had to tap out. Like,
Yeah.
listen to that because it is easy for especially Americans to just be like, I'm just not gonna worry about that stuff. I can't change it anyway, which I understand, but anyway,
When Lent came
but
around, I completely backed out of news, like for Lent. And I was like, I'm not doing any news. I'm focusing on Lent and my faith and, fasting and prayer. And so I drive all day. I'm still a truck driver, so I drive all day. So I usually have something playing in the background, and I went and deleted almost like my subscriptions to almost every news, site, and just replaced it with, different priests giving sermons, and homilies and teaching and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, audiobooks, whatever. I would find something to do. I even found there were days where I would leave the house and I would turn on the New Testament and I would just all day long, I was just listening to the New Testament as I'm driving around doing my job, just to have that like touch of spirituality in my life and not be distracted by all the horrors that we're faced with. And so I'm very behind on news. I have no idea what's going on right now. I haven't because I just didn't go back to it. I was like, I really enjoy my days going through listening to, you know, the 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 biblical teachings and books by St. John of Damascus or whatever. And that's what I'm enjoying doing. I haven't even picked up the news. I have no idea what's going on. I know I see your headlines pop up every morning in my email, and I kind of like, oh, okay. And that's about the extent of me
yeah,
paying
it's still
attention to the
bad.
news. Yeah, I was like, oh, this is still
Yeah.
happening. Okay. But Scott made a comment the
Well,
other day. So I was in Austin last weekend. Yeah, it was last no weekend. Yeah, I don't know, weekend before. And I went and hung out with Scott, saw Buck and all that. And he made a comment that you are the only person covering Somalia right now.
yeah.
What's going on in Somalia? Is this still connected to Obama?
It's connected to George W. Bush. It's the
Oh, it
same
started.
war that he
Okay.
started. Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, because you could trace U.S. intervention in Somalia back, decades and even before, like the Black Hawk Down in the early 90s. But
Right.
the current war, like post 9/11, essentially what happened, the Bush administration backed these warlords in Somalia, that were the same people that the U.S. fought against in the Battle of Mogadishu. It was
Hmm.
literally one of them was like the child of one of them. But back them against, in the name of the war on terror against these Islamic groups, these Islamist groups. And then the Islamic groups got together and kind of kicked them out of Mogadishu. And then the U.S., this is in 2006, the U.S. backed an Ethiopian invasion to get rid of the Muslim coalition and, essentially installed like a foreign backed government. And then the kind of the radical offshoot of the Muslims that they took out of power was Al Shabaab, which
Hmm.
is the same group that the U.S. is fighting and drone bombing today.
Hmm.
And now there's an ISIS offshoot that started in 2015. So it's actually two wars basically in northeast Somalia against the ISIS affiliate. And in southern Somalia, and the U.S. under Trump has been launching record. He shattered all the records for the number of U.S. airstrikes in Somalia like each year. So it's just kind of one of these. It's like a holdover of kind of the terror wars that most people are not aware of is happening. And I've basically relied on what U.S. Africa Command says in their press releases, which
Hmm.
do not get picked up basically anywhere else. I mean, I've had Somali media, reprint my articles. I've gone because there's Somali news sites that I check that do have some stuff, and there's been times I go on there, I'm like, oh, they're actually covering U.S. airstrikes, and I click, and it's just like a reprint of my article. I'm like, man,
Oh, wow.
like there is just no coverage of it. And now recently, this is just the last month, AFRICOM hasn't announced an airstrike in a while, but there's all these reports in Somali media now that civilians are being killed in recent airstrikes. So I'm wondering if they're just not announcing it, or if the UAE and Turkey have also been known to launch airstrikes in Somalia, on the same side as the U.S. So it could
Right,
be them.
right.
But so something I'm actually going to try to figure out today when we're done. But it is kind of incredible how it's a record. And according to the numbers, this group that tracks the airstrikes, I think there's a little caveat because we don't really know exactly how many Bush launched during the 2006 Ethiopian invasion. But
Mm.
according to these numbers, last year the U.S. launched more airstrikes in Somalia than were launched under George W. Bush, Obama, and Biden combined.
Jeez.
They've like really escalated this thing, and there's no sign like all the other stuff from the Pentagon is that the violence, by Al Shabaab and ISIS has also gone up. So there's like no indication that this is helping anything. Um, but yeah, so that goes on.
It's just it's amazing. It's like how long can you bomb a country before you're just like, okay, I think they get the point. You know, like it's it's insane.
Yeah, and it's in support of this government in Mogadishu that really has no control over the country because Somalia, like they're like a clan-based society, like they're naturally kind of decentralized,
Right.
and they're just trying to like impose this federal government on the whole country. And like the for the most part, what the local governments want is like federalism, basically, you know, under the country of Somalia, but a lot, doing kind of their own thing. But
Well, that's what
so it's
happened with
like,
Somaliland, right? It was kind of like this break off group that just kind of basically like we're our own country, like whatever, y'all just leave us
yeah.
alone. That deal. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And the only country that's recognized them now is Israel. They did that last year. Or was that maybe
There
this
was
year?
there's a guy I'd run into last year. I cannot think of his name. I'll try to find him for you and send you his stuff. But he's really interesting, and he talks about he's from Africa. I think he was from Ghana, I think. But he talks about like the problems in Africa and like why what the issues in Africa are. And a lot of people want to blame colonialism and this, that, and the other. And he goes, like, look, man, he goes, we wouldn't be any better off if the white people would have never come. He goes, that's not our issue. He goes, our issue is that you have like just say the country of like Congo, you have 49 different tribes trying to live under the banner of one country. And these tribes have been warring for thousands of years. They don't get along. They never have gotten along. They never will get along. You cannot expect them. So his whole thing is kind of like that whole idea of federalism within the nation lines, and saying,
Mhm.
look, let us have our own like little governments, our own little townships, and we'll have our tribes people, our like leaders of our tribes come together and work together as as tribes and kind of keep the sectarian nature of these warring tribes separated.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that sounds like a good idea to me. And it's like you see the government in Somalia, which, as I understand, I mean, I'm not an expert on Somalia or anything, but outside of Mogadishu, they're viewed as like a foreign government,
Mm.
basically, because they are backed by African Union, the EU, and the U.S.
I mean, that's how I view
And you'll see,
DC.
like
So
recently, yeah, yeah, a couple years ago, they went on an offensive against Al Shabaab, and some of the clans, fought with them. But
right,
then, because of some other issues, the clans turned against the government, and now they're like fighting against them on top of Al Shabaab, and it's just like a whole mess. And it just goes on. Like there's just no sign that this war is gonna if they just keep going in this direction that it's gonna get any better there.
right. And how about how about Nigeria? What's been going on there? Because I've noticed that every during every liturgy, the priest prays for all the wars, the innocents dying of the wars. And here recently, he's been bringing up Nigeria more often than he had in the past. And I was like, well, there must be something going on in Nigeria that's, beyond Trump just running his mouth. Like, is there actually like some like serious action going on there?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and there has been for a while. I mean, Nigeria, there's kind of like different conflicts within Nigeria,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a big country. I think the population's like over 200 million, and it's half Christian and half Muslim. And the main conflict with like Boko Haram and ISIS is mostly in the northeast, and a little bit in the northwest. But and there's you see these attacks on villages, and there's a lot of massacres and things. And there's also like in central Nigeria, there's kind of ethnic and like land disputes that have turned into really nasty wars, and that's where you see a lot of Christians get killed. These attacks by the herdsmen that are ethnically, I think, Fulani, and they're Muslim,
Uh-huh.
and so they attack Christian villages and they'll target churches and things. And then there's also a lot of like banditry, where a lot of these kidnappings are these groups, bandit groups, just trying to get ransoms and things. So it's like a lot of different things happening, and kind of the narrative that Trump was putting out there of like the Christian genocide,
Mm-hmm.
um, gave like kind of a false notion, I think, of what was going on. I mean, the narrative basically that like Fox News was going with is that there's a genocide against Christians in Nigeria, and the government is supporting it, which just isn't true. And in the areas that Boko Haram and the ISIS affiliates are most active, they kill a lot of Muslims as well. And it's mostly Muslims that live in those areas. So to kind of boil it down to that, like I think, I don't. There's an argument to be made that there is an attempted genocide against Christians happening in parts of Nigeria, but then there's other disputes and things causing it as well. It's not just that.
Is
And so
Boko Haram? I was just sorry. I was just curious. Is Boko Haram and ISIS fighting against each other? Because it seems
they've
like
split.
yeah, because it doesn't seem like ISIS has been very active in Africa at all. Because Boko Haram kind of like had that territory, had that continent pretty much under wraps. I mean, I remember hearing of activity of Boko Haram in Namibia a few years ago. So it just seems
Well,
odd. ISIS being there, interacting in Africa.
well, when ISIS first showed up, and I think there's a lot of money pouring in,
Mhm.
from the Gulf Arab states, probably. Boko Haram like declared that loyalty to ISIS, so they became like an ISIS
Oh,
affiliate. But
okay,
then they
okay.
split. Um, I forget what year. Nigeria is not my. I
Yeah,
don't know
yeah,
too.
yeah,
All the details, but I know at one point then they split, and there has been clashes between ISIS. It's called ISWAP, ISIS in West Africa. ISIS. Well, it's not ISIS. Islamic State West Africa
yeah, yeah,
province.
yeah.
ISWAP, and I know there's been like some clashes. It's not like they're at war, but they, with these groups, there's usually some sort of clashes. And then so it's kind of like both. It's both now, and I believe the ISWAP leader was a former Boko Haram guy. They claim to kill some big ISIS leader there in Nigeria with recent U.S. airstrikes. So that's the other thing is that the U.S. just started bombing Nigeria directly. So the U.S. has supported the government for a long time. And Trump decided to do it on Christmas Day. I don't know if you remember that. They
Yes, I do. I do.
Yeah. That was one thing, we were talking about before about turning the news off. So I'm pretty good at separating things like my work day. Uh in the morning when I wake up, I usually just check things out, make sure there's nothing major. But my work day starts at 12 o'clock noon because I work late. So like in the mornings, I'm just kind of tuned out. And then on my days off, sometimes I don't even look at the news. So I remember on Christmas, it was like Christmas night. I just happened to pull out my phone and just see what was happening. And I saw that. And it makes me like extra pissed off,
Mm.
both because I'm against war and also it's my day off.
Yeah.
But, so this was, as I understand, he fired, it was a U.S. warship in the Gulf of Guinea, fired Tomahawk missiles into northwestern Nigeria, supposedly targeting an ISIS affiliate there. But we never it was never confirmed like what if there were casualties or what. But some missiles fell on villages very far from there, and thank God nobody was killed. But it just goes to show like that if you have the U.S. intervening in the name of defending the Christians, and then they end up killing civilians in airstrikes, like isn't that just going to create more animosity against the Christians? I mean,
Right, right.
it's just like like I understand, because I'm Catholic and I followed Catholic media for a while, even before kind of my reversion, and I've always been aware of this really bad situation because it's a lot of Catholic communities and
Mm,
churches, and priests get kidnapped all the time.
right.
But like, do you think the solution to that is like a U.S. drone war? Like, how have those gone? Um, they're all still going on basically, except for like Pakistan, obviously Afghanistan. But look what happened there. Like, you know, did that turn out well? But it's just, I just can't think of a worse prescription for the problem than and Nigeria too. They're notorious. The government they're notorious for killing a lot of civilians in their airstrikes. There some instances
Right.
where they've killed hundreds,
Yeah.
and including recent incidents. So it's just like it's just a mess, and I think it's just going to become more of a mess with this kind of escalation from the U.S. and the Nigerian government.
Well, how about okay, so we're gonna go east now. Let's talk about Syria and what's been going on in Syria since we have ISIS running the country now in Syria. I had heard that now this was probably June of last year, so maybe a year ago, I was hearing some rumblings that there was a lot of attacks on the Christian villages in Syria, but then it just kind of went radio silent after that. Is there something going on between the government having their brown shirts attack Christian villages, or did the government put a stop to the Muslims attacking Christians in the villages? Like, what was going on there?
Yeah, so there's been some attacks against Christians. There was a suicide bombing. That was kind of the big one last year. And you see the way that the government kind of covers it up. They claim it was ISIS, but it turns out the group that took credit for it was one of their guys. And
Mm,
they're kind of the government's also kind of ISIS as well. There's a lot of
right.
fluidity between
Yeah.
all these different groups.
Right.
But the guy who took over, who the president of Syria was the founder of Al Qaeda in
Al
Syria,
Qaeda,
who
that's what it
was an
was.
ally of al Baghdadi, the founder of ISIS. But they all had their splits too and their clashes. But this is
Hmm.
where this guy comes from, and the military now is basically made up of Al Qaeda, ISIS, and like foreign jihadist guys, while they're also fighting like some other ISIS groups. But so there was a suicide bombing, and then I forget exactly what happened. I remember recently, a few months ago, there was some attacks on Christians, not so much from like the military, but from Muslims.
Mm,
In one of the villages where there's a lot of tensions, and we haven't seen. We saw mass executions of civilians by the new government, but that was mostly against the Alawites in Western Syria because
right.
Assad was an Alawite. So there's a lot of animosity there. And I mean, like these guys are taking people out back, putting them on their knees and shooting them in the head, and then
Right.
posting it on like Telegram.
Right.
Um,
Mm,
and then the same thing happened in the South against the Druze. And with both of these instances, there was like things that preceded them that, there were some like armed clashes, and then they always use that as a pretext to go in and like just straight up execute people. And they did it to thousands of civilians. And uh, that happened also in the South against the Druze. And I know in at least one instance, there was a Druze convert to Christianity who was murdered by the jihadists with his whole
mm,
family. That was a really horrible incident.
jeez.
I
Yeah.
know I forget his name, but there was a Palestinian Christian American who was on Tucker Carlson recently who talked about it. He knew him, but yeah, that was really horrible. But as far as I know, I mean, I haven't seen like there's been killings of Christians. Like the thing is that the stuff that gets attention is like when they go in there and execute a lot of
Yeah,
people.
like
But there
large
is like it's
numbers.
always
Yeah.
yeah, things are there's always things happening like these against the minorities in Syria, and
Yeah.
it's a really bad situation. I mean, again, look at what how did U.S. intervention go in Syria? Like you
Yeah.
want to bring that to Nigeria?
Exactly. We end up
But
with
one thing
Boko
that happened,
Haram as running the country of Nigeria.
yeah, right. um, yeah, but don't worry, he moderated now. He wears a suit now.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. He shaves.
and one thing that happened recently too is the U.S.
It's
Withdrew,
harder to
pulled
kill
all
people
troops
if
out
you
of
don't have a
Syria.
beard.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm. It's like
Um,
it's like Samson. He shaved his beard and he lost his
yeah.
strength.
He lost his desire to cut people's heads off.
I guess. Yeah. Now he just pays other people to do it.
Yeah. So yeah, Syria is it's just crazy what happened there. And then the U.S. is gone now, as far as I understand, it's pulled out of all of its bases. And so
Mm.
why that happened, it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, it's good that the U.S. is out of Syria, but it's also like, look at how we left the place. It's like, man, um,
Well, I think part of it is in some weird kind of like distorted American geopolitical way. The strategy is that the Al Qaeda guy is more likely to work with U.S. troops in the region than they are to work with Russia. And so that was part of the issue was Assad's
yeah,
ties to Russia were causing a lot of this tension. And I think the Al Qaeda guy just said, "Yeah, you know what? I'll work for you and the Jews, and I'll ignore Russia. Like we'll kind of like tell Russia to beat beat feet and get out of here."
yeah, and Iran,
Yeah,
that's really the big one I think when it comes to the region is that they are sworn enemies of the
that's right.
Shiites,
Yeah, the
the
Sunnis
Iranians,
don't like the
Hezbollah.
Shiites.
Yeah. So it was, in a way, a very big strategic victory for Israel, which Netanyahu made very clear he was very happy about it when Assad ran out of there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so in a way, it is like mission accomplished. Like this is what we wanted. But what actually I think what made the withdrawal happen, and it kind of happened quickly, was the U.S. allied with this new Syrian government, with this military that's full of these jihadist guys. And in December last year, it was two U.S. National Guardsmen and an American civilian interpreter were killed in an insider attack in central Syria while they were with these, patrolling with this new military that again is like these foreign jihadist guys. And Trump, covered it up essentially. The Trump administration blamed it on ISIS. Um, but what it was, the government, it was a member of the
Technically, that's
Syrian
not a
security
lie.
forces, and well, yeah, you're right. But he said in his statement that the government had nothing to do with it, that they're outraged about it.
No, okay.
Um, and then they went on this bombing campaign against what they call ISIS in eastern Syria, and it's like I don't even know what they're bombing. I really don't. And then at the time you had like Trump administration officials that are very public saying like these guys are our new allies. They're going to be the most effective allies against ISIS. But I know like there's people in the Pentagon that know this is a disaster. Like having U.S. troops operating alongside these guys, there's going to be more
Yeah.
things like this are going to happen. And then
Right.
they ended up pulling out. So I think
Well,
that's
it's
what
like when we
caused it.
were supporting the white helmets, a few years back. I mean, it's just none of this stuff ever goes well, you know. Um, all right. So we got Lebanon. I haven't talked to you about Lebanon. I have a question about Lebanon. All right. And I asked Scott this, and Scott
Hmm.
didn't know. You might not know either. So I was talking because I go to Antiochian parish. So the Orthodox church I go to is Antiochian. So a lot of Lebanese Syrians go to my parish. One of the gentlemen I'm really close to, he's from Lebanon, central Lebanon, and his family's home still there. And they had six families out of southern Lebanon, out of Christian villages in southern Lebanon, living in their family home for a while. And then there was a ceasefire called. Once the ceasefire called, they all left his family's home, went back south to their villages. Then the ceasefire ended kind of abruptly, and so they fled again. He doesn't know where they went. But so just that as a background of who this guy is and his interaction with Lebanon, and that when he they plan on moving back to Lebanon here before he dies, before he passes away. But he was telling me that Hezbollah is at this current time has a lot of Christians from these southern villages involved too. A lot of the military age men of the Christian villages have actually joined up with Hezbollah and are now fighting alongside Hezbollah because the nation of Lebanon does not have a military and they wanted to defend their homeland. Do you know anything about this? Because Scott was like, I hadn't heard that. I thought they were all Muslim, and I was like, I don't know. This is what I'm being told. So have you heard anything like this?
So I haven't. I know that there are Christians who support Hezbollah, from the South. And I
Hmm.
also know there's Christians who really don't like Hezbollah, and it's generally, they're from further north.
Okay.
But there are, I know, remember there was a report, I think it was from the Telegraph. It had like an amazing headline that I think they deleted it. But the headline was something like Christians and Hezbollah team up against, Israel and the Epstein administration or something like that. And it was about how man, I wish I could remember. I could find it because I archived it, um, but it was interviewing Christians from these villages in the South that were actually were threatened by ISIS, back in 2015, 2016, and they're saying the government of Lebanon left us. The only people here who fought for us were Hezbollah,
Mm,
and now it's kind of a similar thing with Israel.
right.
So it wouldn't surprise me to learn that because you look at what's happening in South Lebanon, what Israel's been doing, like if Christian men from the South wanted to fight, their only option would be to sign up to fight with Hezbollah.
Right.
And I don't know like what their rules are about Christians joining, but I know that there's like I've seen like a flag which is like the Hezbollah like Christian unit. I don't know how real that is.
Okay.
I've just seen that online.
Okay.
So I haven't heard that specifically, but it wouldn't really surprise me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It was just something I was curious about because I was talking to George about this a few weeks ago at church, and he was telling me, I was like, really? I was like, I had never heard this. Like, I always thought it was like a bunch of Shiites. Like, that's what I thought it was.
Yeah,
So,
that is interesting. I want to look more into that, see if I
yeah.
could
Yeah. Scott said he
get
was going
some
to
kind
ask
of
somebody,
confirmation. 'Cause-
but I haven't heard back from him about it. So I don't know if he remembered to ask or not. Um, he said he had somebody that would know, but I can't remember the guy's name he
yeah,
was telling me. Um, have you read that Brad Hoff book, Syria Crucified?
yeah. I have that
I love that book.
somewhere
Yeah,
right here.
it's a great book. I just happened to look up. We were talking about Syria. I looked up and it's sitting right there. I was like, oh yeah, yeah, that's a great book. Okay, what's going on in Lebanon? Is there still a ceasefire? I heard that this quote unquote peace deal that was to never become maybe kind of sort of happening um, had put restrictions on Israel's interactions with Lebanon and what they were able to do. Is there actually a ceasefire in Lebanon? Is Israel still attacking Lebanon? What's happening there?
Yeah, there's no ceasefire in Lebanon. They said that they agreed to one last month, but it was never real. Because since the war with Iran started, Israel invaded Lebanon further. And so essentially, you mentioned the ceasefire deal you mentioned. If that was recent, that was probably the November 2024 deal, which happened after Israel really escalated and they killed Nasrallah and they did the pager attack and everything. And then there was a deal signed between Israel, Lebanon, and Hezbollah in November 2024,
No,
and
I'm
Biden
thinking
gave
about
Israel
this.
like a side.
I'm thinking about this Iran deal. I had read somewhere that
Yeah.
I had seen like a headline that said
Oh
that.
no, you're right about that.
Okay, okay.
I mean, what you're talking about, your friend from church saying like the family going back
Oh,
south when
yeah,
there
yeah,
was a
yeah,
ceasefire.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I probably wasn't specific, but that's probably this ceasefire deal that he was talking about because there was a big de-escalation, but Israel did continue attacks in Lebanon and they killed a few hundred people from
yeah.
November 2024 until the war with Iran started. And throughout that whole time, Hezbollah did not fire back once. But then on March 2nd, after Israel killed Khamenei, the Iranian supreme leader, Hezbollah fired some rockets into Israel, and then Israel used that, as the pretext to really escalate, and they invaded further because they never actually pulled fully out of South Lebanon, even though it was required under the ceasefire deal. So they
Right.
invaded further, blew, and started really bombing. I mean, they've killed thousands, over 3,000 people in the tiny country of Lebanon since March 2nd. And then so then the Iran thing happened, and part of the ceasefire was because Pakistan mediated it, and they put out a statement on it, declaring it. And in their statement that was approved by the U.S., it said that it included a ceasefire in Lebanon, and Israel basically said, "No, no, it doesn't." And they actually escalated.
Oh, wow.
And then they agreed on a ceasefire, but then they said, "Oh, we're going to have the right to respond to any threats." And they're still occupying a whole bunch of South Lebanon. They've declared that they're basically going to occupy all of it south of the Litani River. And so the attacks have continued. And the big difference now between the November 2024 deal and whatever this quasi ceasefire is that Hezbollah is firing back this time. And they've actually been killing and hitting a lot of IDF troops with these drones that they have, these like fiber optic cable drones.
Mhm.
And because of that, Israel's now escalating further. They're saying we got to invade more to take out this drone threat. So the whole thing's a mess. And, from what I understand, Trump at one point last month, he declared that Israel was prohibited from further strikes in Lebanon. And then, like an hour later, Israel bombed Lebanon. But from the reporting I've read, that I think is probably true, basically, the U.S. did just ask them basically not to bomb, not to take out high rise buildings in Beirut. That was like the one restriction. Basically, don't bomb Beirut or Dahia, which is the southern suburb of Beirut, where like a lot of the Hezbollah guys are.
That's kind of like with the whole 12-day
And
war thing. After we had sent the stealth bombers over there to bomb the nuclear facility, Trump's like, "All right, it's over, no more bombing." And like an hour later, Israel sent planes over there, and Trump like gets on True Social like, "Bad Israel, don't do that, Israel. You can't." It's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
dude, obviously Bibi Netanyahu does not care what you have to say.
yeah, yeah. We saw this with Gaza. It was like the weekend before that's another place where there's no ceasefire.
Mm.
But there has been like a de-escalation.
They're
But it
still
was like,
bombing Gaza.
yeah,
What's left to bomb?
they killed 14 people there yesterday. Um,
Jeez.
Tense. They killed Hamas's military chief yesterday. But they like the other day they bombed a family in a tent, killed a 6-year-old girl, and it's just like it's horrible. But they've killed over 900 people there since the so-called ceasefire deal was signed in October 2025. But the week before that, so I think if my timeline is right, the ceasefire deal was signed on like a Monday or a Tuesday, and the week before that there was progress on negotiations, and Trump on the Friday put out a post on Truth Social saying, basically ordering Israel to stop bombing Gaza. And then Israel escalated and killed like 70 people. And then Trump puts out another post the next day thanking Israel for like de-escalating in Gaza. So it's like either Trump is just completely impotent or it's just for an American audience, those declarations that he makes. And it's like a lot of people buy it. They see that and they say, "Oh, see, he's really calling the shots," even though they're not listening, or there is some kind of handshake deal behind the scenes that you don't
Right.
actually have to listen to what I say.
Yeah, it's
But
absurd. It's no wonder people think that Israel controls the United States government. I mean, when you look at how blatantly all this stuff is, it's like, yeah, we'll send you like $30 billion. No, don't bomb them. Oh, damn, they're bombing them. It's like it's like Lucy with the football, man. It's crazy. All right.
and
Well,
the State Department's like, just one more thing. The State Department's official justification for the Iran war is that it was launched at the request of Israel and in the
mhm.
collective self-defense of Israel. And then they also added and in the self-defense of US forces in the region, but it's like, come on.
Yeah,
like
what was it? Marco Rubio
it's just
said,
crazy.
like, we knew Israel was going to bomb Iran. So, in order to protect our military bases, we went ahead and preemptively struck Iran.
We joined in.
Yeah. I was like,
Yeah.
what? Why don't you just bomb Israel? Because it seems like they're the problem here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's really crazy.
All right. So, what's going on with Iran right now? Is there going to be a peace deal? I see headlines like once a week that there's a peace deal imminent, and then a couple of days later I see, oh, never mind. You know, so what's
Yeah.
happening with the whole idea of a
So,
peace deal?
I mean, it's tough to know. I've basically just started to just ignore those reports about like a deal is imminent because there's so many of them were coming out, and it was clearly they're trying to like calm the markets and things and lower the price of oil. Like the timing of some of this stuff, it was obviously like aimed at market manipulation.
Yeah.
But then over the weekend, there's again all it's like tough to ignore when it's like my job is to follow the news. So there's all these reports over the weekend that a deal is imminent, both from U.S. and Iranian sources. And then it all kind of falls apart on Sunday. Trump adds this new demand that like the Abraham Accords must be expanded, Saudi Arabia must normalize with Israel. Like I think what he's doing is because Israel doesn't like the deal, he's trying to give Israel an incentive to agree, but by adding this condition that's just not going to, just by complicating everything. So I have no idea. Like, and then on Monday, the U.S. bombed Iran again. They said it was self defense strikes, which is, I mean, again, it's just like laughable. But the state of
So
things now is,
obviously
the U.S. is
Iran's
still
going to
enforcing.
retaliate. So
Yeah, I think Iran is still leaving room for negotiations. They said they shot down a U.S. Reaper drone and things, but saying that they will respond. I think they might be waiting, and I think Trump also might be waiting until the Hajj is over because that's happening this week in Saudi Arabia, and
mm,
I don't think either side wants to be. The Saudis have probably told Trump that if you're going to restart this war, wait until like the pilgrims are gone
yeah.
because that would be a nightmare for Saudi Arabia and also Iran. I mean, they don't want to be responsible for they don't want to be firing drones and missiles into Saudi Arabia when
Well, and
all the Hajj is happening.
Trump's buddy Dana White's calling him, going, "Dude, we have UFC events in Abu Dhabi coming up pretty soon. You need to
Yeah,
cut this shit out."
yeah. It is crazy what has happened. Like I still kind of can't believe it that this war actually started.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean,
but
I
now it's
was
funny. It
dead
seems
set
like
up to the day before. I was telling Kyle Matovic, I was like, dude, no one's bombing Iran. And then I wake up the next morning and it's like, yeah, US bombed Iran. And I texted Kyle and I said, well, I was wrong.
yeah.
So
It's
yeah, it's
that's the
crazy.
thing. So I was right. I thought this war was going to happen in the months before the current
Mhm.
war. I was pretty convinced, even though it was like so crazy to do. But I think maybe the June 2025 war, I was like kind of my head. It's like, no way is he actually going to start a war with Iran, even though there's all these signs leading to it. But I was basically convinced at the end of that war that it was going to happen again because Israel
Right.
didn't achieve its goals and they still haven't, but they took a worse beating this time.
Well,
But
without the US putting troops on the ground in Iran and actually fighting a ground war, Israel will never achieve its goals. It needs us to commit our military troops to the ground in Iran in order to achieve its goals. And it's not, I don't think that's going to happen. Now, I could wake up tomorrow like before and say, oh, well, crap, I just put my foot in my mouth again. But I just don't see that as a possibility. I don't think Trump has any, I don't think he's willing to go that far.
yeah, well, the thing is that apparently there have been some serious discussions about not like a full scale invasion. I mean, that's not a realistic option when it comes to
Right.
Iran. Like sending in U.S. troops to like take Tehran, like I don't think there's a way, any way that happens, or they try
Right.
to do anything like that. But the things that they've talked about are like seizing islands in the Persian Gulf, seizing ports, or potentially going in and getting like the enriched uranium that's buried under the rubble.
I've heard
Um,
that. I heard they
but
tried
those
that.
aren't like,
Did they
yeah, I don't
use
think they did.
they see what I had heard was they had used the excuse of either a helicopter or a plane going down in Iran territory to send in special forces, like a unit of like 20 Green Berets or something. And they were trying to make their way to the facility to retract some of it. I don't know. I don't know how true that is.
Yeah,
I kind of heard it and I was
yeah,
just like, oh, these guys are idiots, and just went on about my business.
yeah. I mean, maybe there's some evidence of something attempt like that, but as far as I know, there's not really enough to say that's what happened there. That
Okay.
it wasn't, the rescue mission that they claimed it to be. Or I guess it could have been something else and it turned into a rescue mission. I mean, I really don't know.
I think it was
But
because of the amount of troops they had sent in, and they were like, if this were merely a rescue mission, there wouldn't have been that many people that were sent in. It would have been
yeah,
like a,
and they
a
did lose
unit of like
a lot of
six.
aircraft.
Yeah, yeah. So that maybe I think that's what the whole where the suspicion came up that they were trying to do something else. So
But so if they do something like I don't think that's a path to victory is
right.
sending in troops. But Israel does have a way to achieve victory if it wants to, and that is using its nuclear weapons.
They don't have
Um,
any. They can't use them if
and I
they don't
think,
have them.
yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, that would be a problem for the U.S. then, because they're
Yeah.
not part of the non-proliferation agreement. So the U.S. would then have to cut ties with Israel.
Well, I, so I think it's an implied. I don't know. I doubt Israel. Netanyahu has said this to Trump, but I do think it's kind of an implied threat that if you don't help us, well, we're just going to have to use what we have, our
Yeah,
nuclear weapons.
yeah,
Because there was recently reporting from the Washington Post that found that the U.S. you know I don't know if people understand like how much Israel relies on the U.S. It's not just about military aid and giving them weapons, but it's also about physically defending Israel from Iranian missiles and drones. And even then, a lot got through. But the U.S. used more munitions from U.S. warships in the region. Air defense is actually in Israel and in other parts of the region. The U.S. fired way more munitions trying to shoot down Iranian missiles and drones than Israel did during the
yeah,
war. So Israel can't fight this war on its own unless it, decides to use nukes. And even then, like, Iran, if they just lit up Israel, like with all their missiles, I mean, that would be, pretty major.
Right, man. Well, it's been an hour. I'm going to let you go. I know you got a bunch of work to do, and I've given you things to research, and because I don't think you work hard enough, you need more stuff to do. But plug anything you want to plug.
Yeah, read antiwar.com. I'm the news editor there, so I cover the news, like kind of short news stories that I write every day. And I also have a podcast called Anti-War News with Dave DeCamp, which is me. And that's
Yep.
you can watch it on YouTube or Rumble or I post it on X. And also most people listen to the podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. It's like a daily update on the US foreign policy and
Yeah, it's
wars and
usually
stuff.
about 25, 30
And that's about
minutes.
it.
Just information like you got today without all the jibber jabber from me. So,
Well, I enjoyed talking to you about, the the faith and everything. I think it's fun to talk about.
yeah, we'll
It
expand.
switches things
We'll
up.
we'll do that again, and we'll expand on that some more, and we'll dig down deeper next time maybe. I just kind of wanted to touch on.
Yeah,
I
let's do
I
it.
think it's important for people to see how these jobs that you guys are doing out there affect you, not only emotionally but spiritually, and how important having that spiritual life connected to Christ is important to y'all.
Yeah, yeah, it's very I can't imagine life without it now. Um,
Yeah.
you know.
All right. Well, I'm going to stop this podcast and we will say our goodbyes.